Will the year 2023 be a year of global war? China and Russia are both making mobilization moves that are raising red flags. Why are China and Russia both suddenly so concerned about mobilizing their troops? What we're witnessing right now is unlike anything that we've seen since World War II. The Russians are mobilizing hundreds of thousands of fresh troops as they prepare for a new offensive in Ukraine. And meanwhile, NATO countries are getting ready to send heavy tanks to Ukrainians for the first time since the war started. But why have the Chinese decided that a nationwide mobilization may soon be necessary? Is China expecting a war? It's being reported that anyone in China that is 18 years or older could potentially be subject to mobilization under a brand new law which will go into effect next month. Inconvenient Truth by Jennifer Zheng, she tweets, "Ready for war? CCP has quietly passed its reserve military service law, taking effect for the March 1st, 2023. Anyone who is 18 years or older is obliged to enlist after a national defense mobilization is announced. After receiving the call-up notice, reservists must report," she said. And two, the designated place at the specific time in accordance with the requirements. After the state issued the mobilization order, the reserve personnel who have not received the call-up notice shall not leave the reserve registration place without approval of the troops and the military service organs of the reserve registration place. If they have left, they shall return immediately or stand by in the same place, she said in her tweets. So you can find the full text of the law in the link here. I translated the page into English so that I could read it, he says, and it definitely sounds like the Chinese are laying the groundwork for a massive nationwide mobilization of young people. But what would they need to do? Why would they need to do that? Nobody is going to invade China, so why would they be going to war? Needless to say, the answer is obvious. The only reason why China would be involved in a major war is if they decide to invade Taiwan, and that may happen a lot sooner than many of the experts had been anticipating. The moment that an invasion of Taiwan begins, the United States and China will be in a state of war, and that will mean that the flow of goods from China will immediately stop. Most Americans simply don't understand what that would mean. For example, our healthcare industry would instantly be thrown into a state of complete and utter chaos. A terrifying percentage of Americans' active pharmaceutical ingredients are made in China, according to Republican Senator Tom Cotton. That includes 95% of imports of ibuprofen, 70% of acetaminophen, and up to 45% of the imported penicillin supply. What would happen if China simply turned that supply off? And they could. These are thousands upon thousands of other things that are manufactured in China that Americans use on a daily basis that we would not be able to get anywhere anymore. In other words, we would be in a world of hurt. And once Taiwan is under attack, the factories that are located there would not be able to supply us with any more microchips, and that would deeply affect virtually every single industry in the entire country. Taiwan, the object of China's short-term expansion strategy, produces most of the world's microchips. A Chinese invasion would threaten America's supply of semiconductors, which are needed to run everything from cars to refrigerators. If China invades Taiwan, it truly will be a nightmare scenario for the entire globe, so our leaders should be doing all they can to find a peaceful solution. But now the Chinese spy balloon saga has our leaders in Washington angrier with the Chinese than ever. Elsewhere, the Russians have already been mobilizing hundreds of thousands of new troops, and it appears that they are poised to make a really big move. The following comes from an article posted on Yahoo News entitled, "Vladimir Putin is about to make shock gains." Ukrainian Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov says Russia has mobilized much more than 300,000 troops, perhaps up to 500,000, and these are pouring into Ukraine in preparation for what is expected to be a major offensive in the coming days and weeks. Although Kiev the capital of Ukraine, as we know, has also been building up its forces and supplying them with modern equipment donated by the West. Putin has a much greater advantage in troop numbers than he did when he invaded a year ago. Despite repeated optimistic reports of Russia running low on artillery shells, a battle winner in this conflict, Putin's war stocks are vast, and his factories have been working around the clock to churn out even more. Of course, the Russians have already been making gains on a daily basis. After months of telling us that Ukraine is winning, even publications such as the Wall Street Journal are now being forced to admit that the Russians are on the move. On 5 fronts in the eastern Donetsk and Lugansk regions, Russian forces launched several attacks in eastern Ukraine, pushing for a breakthrough on the battlefield ahead of the delivery of new Western weapons, although the UK cast doubt on the prospects for a major Russian offensive. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces say Russia was regrouping and attacking on 5 fronts in the eastern Donetsk and Lugansk regions as part of a wider offensive anticipated by Kiev and its Western allies. If the Russians start gobbling up huge chunks of new territory in Ukraine, there will inevitably be very strong response from the Western powers, and that will bring us even closer to a nuclear war. The Russians can see the writing on the wall, and so they are starting to fix up bomb shelters all over the nation. Bomb shelters across Russia are undergoing systematic inspection and repairs following a Kremlin order to upgrade the country's crumbling Soviet-era infrastructure, according to current and former officials who spoke to the Moscow Times. Many of Russia's thousands of bunkers, reinforced cellars, and other safe hideouts have been mothballed for decades, but as the war in Ukraine drags on, local authorities appear to be spending hundreds of millions of rubles to again make them fit for habitation. The Russians have thousands of bomb shelters that could be used in the event of a nuclear war, a conflict. So what do we have for our citizens? Nothing. If you live in a targeted area where the nukes start flying, you'll want to say your prayers because your time will be up. Sadly, this entire war with Russia could have been avoided so easily. A tentative peace deal was ready to go last April, but the Western powers killed it. But the negotiations ultimately failed after more Western pressure. Boris Johnson visited Kiev April 2022, urging Zelensky not to negotiate with Russia. According to a report from Ukrainska Pravda, he said even if Ukraine was ready to sign a deal with Russia, Kiev's Western backers were not. That's very strange. Later on, in April, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said there were some NATO countries that wanted to prolong the war in Ukraine. He said after the talks in Istanbul, we did not think that war would take this long, but following the NATO foreign ministers' meeting, it was the impression that there are those within the NATO member states that want the war to continue. Let the war continue and Russia gets weaker. They don't care much about the situation in Ukraine, Cavusoglu said. And now we stand on the brink of the unthinkable, and we are almost out of exit ramps. Thanks to our very foolish leaders, we could soon find ourselves fighting Russia and China simultaneously. Sadly, most Americans have absolutely no idea that we are racing towards oblivion. Most people just assume that our leaders know exactly what they're doing and that they have everything under control. Unfortunately, the truth is that they have no idea what they're doing, and I believe this will become exceedingly clear as 2023 rolls along. And this is by Michael Snyder. He says, finally here, Michael's new book entitled End Times is now available in paperback and for Kindle on Amazon. About the author, my name is Michael. My brand new book entitled End Times is now available on Amazon. In addition to my new book, I've written 6 other books that are available on Amazon, including 7-Year Apocalypse, Lost Prophecies of the Future of America, The Beginning of the End, and Living a Life That Really Matters. When you purchase any of these books, you help to support the work that I'm doing. And one way that you can really help is by sending copies as gifts to family and friends. Time is short, and I need help getting these warnings into the hands of as many people as possible. I've published thousands of articles on the Economic Collapse blog, End of the American Dream, and the Most Important News. And the articles that I publish on those sites are republished on dozens of other prominent websites all over the globe. I always freely and happily allow others to republish my articles on their own websites, but I also ask that you include this about the author section with each article. The materials contained in this article is for general information purposes only, and readers should consult licensed professionals before making any legal, business, financial, or health decisions. I encourage you to follow me on social media, Facebook and Twitter, and any way that you can share these articles with others is definitely a great help. These are such troubled times and people need hope. John 3:16 tells us about the hope that God has given us through Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. If you have not already done so, I strongly urge you to invite Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior today. This is by Michael Snyder on End of the American Dream. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box